Tantalus Entertainment presents the Killer Score Podcast.
Alright guys, nice to see you again, and welcome to the third episode of Killer Score. I, of course, am your host, Dalton Morrison. I am a certified PhD and... not PhD, oh jeez. I have a degree in journalism. They don't do PhDs for journalism last time I checked. My bad. I have a YouTube channel, Sick Jacket Man, videos coming soon, a Twitter of the same name, and you can also find some voice acting work I've done on Mr. Rogues' channel as Killer Moth.
Richard Eckert here, of Rich Reviews. I have done similar voice work for Mr. Rogues as Two-Face in the Arkham Patient sessions, and contrary to my first appearance on the podcast, I did not trademark the bringing the truth that trailers don't things, so that is there for the convenience of the audience members who did not recognize it as a joke. I did not clarify that before. I apologize.
I'm Erin Murray. I am from witchandcrafts.com. We are very excited to announce that we have just released a fall 2020 collection for Witch and Crafts.
Ooh.
We have a lot of new items. Golf clubs. We have a lot of new items available on the website, so go ahead and check that out. It's witchandcrafts.com, and I will put a link in the description.
And I am very proud to introduce the third episode, which I am our little gopher on. I brought this to you guys. Today we will be looking at the 1974 Brian De Palma-produced, directed and written film, Phantom of the Paradise. Some of you might have heard of Brian De Palma. I would be shocked if you didn't. Brian De Palma has directed over 50 films in his life, and some pretty notable ones. It was produced by Harbor Productions and distributed by 20th Century Fox, and was financed independently before being sold to 20th Century Fox. It's essentially a loose adaptation of three different stories: Phantom of the Opera, Faust, and The Picture of Dorian Gray. And while the film was picked up for quite some money, about $2 million, and had a budget of around $1.5 million, it was a box office failure. I couldn't find any exact numbers for the total gross distribution and amount it made over its lifetime. I could only find estimates, and the only concrete numbers I could find were it only made about $250,000 on its opening weekend.
Jeez.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But it is a huge cult hit. It has garnered a big enough fan base to occasionally hold Phantom Palooza, which has actually featured some of the actors from the film in it. William Finley, who sadly passed away a few years ago, and played the titular Phantom. But the reason we are talking about this movie is, one, it's a disco horror film musical, which, come on. Two, it's one of the weirder adaptations of Phantom of the Opera. And three, it's a freaking disco horror film that has music by Paul Williams of Muppets fame. Yes, Paul Williams, who you might know as the writer behind the classic Rainbow Connection, who also did some work on other critically acclaimed films, such as he wrote one of the songs, which is the name of which is slipping my mind right now, but he wrote one of the songs for the 1970 version of A Star is Born. I believe he actually wrote the love song for the film.
Yes, the name of which is eluding me too. And as a voice nerd, I must point out that he turned in a wonderful performance as the Penguin in the Batman animated series.
Also true, yeah.
Yeah, this film was plagued with issues too. One of which was they had some production problems for effects and stuff going off in general. It was actually filmed at at a still existent to this day venue, the Majestic Theater in Dallas. And interestingly enough, one of the big problems they had during filming is that the villain of the film, played by Paul Williams himself, who also does the singing voice of the Phantom, his character's name is Swan, and there was an issue because they were going to call his record label in the film Swan Song. However, that was the name of the record company of Led Zeppelin.
Ooh.
So, while the name of his record label is different in the film, you can still see like little things that say Swan Song in the movie. So, fun little thing to catch. Anyway.
Bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, let me grab. Why don't you grab the box over there, Rich? And one of you who hasn't seen the film can read off the synopsis for our audience.
I pride myself in narration. Aaron, do you mind if I do?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I apologize for overstepping if I did.
You're good.
Phantom of the Paradise is a groundbreaking cult film favorite from acclaimed writer-director Brian De Palma of Carrie and Dress to Kill fame. Paul Williams wrote the acclaimed score for this musical horror classic and stars as an evil record tycoon, haunted and taunted by the disfigured composer Winslow Leach, played by William Finley of Sisters fame, whom he once wronged. Cheered by the Los Angeles Times as a delightful, outrageous visual triumph, and also starring Jessica Harper of Suspiria and Shock Treatment, and Garrett Graham of Used Cars and Terror Vision, this hilarious send-up of the glam rock era is pure entertainment from beginning to end.
Yeah, I feel that that back of the box does do it justice. We're going to be watching the Blu-ray version of this, put out by the incomparable master distributor Shout Factory, who I'm a huge fan of. They've put out a bunch of Japanese stuff I'm a huge nerd for, like Sentai work and old tokusatsu shows. And in general, they put out a lot of great Blu-ray editions of some cult hits, too. I think a few years ago they did film I'm not too familiar with, but I've heard good things of. Never actually seen it. Streets of Fire. They put out a collector's version of that.
Yep. I have to say, too, they are a great distributor. Like,
oh, yeah.
It's amazing what they have brought back in terms of filmography. Like, some days I'll lament that I can't find a copy of something on home media, but then, bam!
Turns out Shout Factory put it out. It's crazy just how much they love to do their cult movies. And so I'm the introductory member for this episode, mostly due to the fact that I'm the only one here who's seen it. I first became aware of the film in like around the early to mid 2010s when I heard it talked about online in some certain circles, and I found rented a copy of it through through Netflix's DVD Blu-ray mail service, which they still do, but most people aren't aware of because, well, you know,
streaming
Zoomers.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, Zoomers watching this, you used to be able to rent movies through the mail, and they would send you a disc to watch. I know, crazy idea, just absolutely baffling. But yeah, that was actually what put Blockbuster out of business. If you don't know what that is, look it up. It's gonna blow your mind.
It's that store that is now a 7-Eleven in my neighborhood.
Yeah, it's actually 7-Eleven in my neighborhood too. My old Blockbuster.
That's
I don't
weird.
even know what the Blockbuster in my neighborhood used to be.
It's like
I think it's a restaurant now.
It's like both of our lives are a Social Distortion song.
Yeah, I also have to check what the one I used to go to when I was a kid was, because the one over in my current neighborhood I remember is now a 7-Eleven. I have no idea what the one in Browns Mills is, though, anymore. Do you know? Have you been to Browns Mills in a while? Do you remember?
Not in a couple of years.
Do you remember where the old Blockbuster was there?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. I'll have to take a look sometime.
There used to be a video store around the corner from my house, but that's a hair salon now.
For he who
They
controls
expanded it.
For he who controls the Slurpee and the hairstyles controls the world.
So, I remember really enjoying it, thinking it was kitsch and very camp, but, you know, regardless, was fantastic and a lot of fun to watch. The music in this film is phenomenal, but it's Paul Williams. There's no surprise there. And one last note before I take some stuff from you guys is the narration, to tie into more star power. The narration for the intro of the film is actually done by Rod Serling.
Oh.
Yes.
Of the Twilight
Twilight
Zone.
Zone.
Yes, which I'll be surprised if anyone here doesn't know what Twilight Zone is, because even the younger audience members have probably had their English professor show them an episode of, like, the Twilight Zone at some point.
It's also on Netflix.
That's it.
For which I am very grateful, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've noticed it's more of a thing nowadays where, like, English professors tend to show an episode of Twilight Zone. Usually I notice, like, they do something where, like, hey, we're going to talk about dramatic irony. And the example they use is, like...
Time Enough at Last.
Time Enough at Last. That's one of the big
I remember
ones.
vividly... I'm sorry, Aaron.
In my... I think it was the 8th grade, we read a short story. I can't remember the name of it, and I can't remember the name of the episode of the Twilight Zone, but it was about, like, this town that got paranoid because there was a bunch of... They thought aliens were coming.
The Monsters Zoo on Maple Street.
Yes,
Great
and we
episode.
watched that episode.
I love that episode.
I have vivid memories of watching Time Enough at Last in class
Same, yeah.
with my friends, and when it got to the twist at the end with the glasses, I actually cried into my friend Chris's shoulder because I'm like, that's so unfair.
I remember in my English class when that moment happened, and I remembered hearing, like, a perfectly timed chorus of people just going, oh... Just like, jeez.
Burgess Meredith knew how to wring sympathy out.
Yeah, he really did. So, yeah. Thoughts before going into this from you guys, because neither of you have seen this, I believe.
I have seen clips of it. I've seen, like, a music review of Phantom of the Paradise, so I'm very vaguely familiar with it. Just very vaguely, because I haven't watched anything from it since high school. But I am excited for this. I will honestly say I am very excited for this because I've seen clips from it. I've seen bits and people talking about the music from it before. And the way that Dalton put it was a mix of Phantom of the Opera, Faust, and what was the third one?
Picture of Dorian
Picture of Dorian Gray. And I'm like, okay, you combine some of, like, my favorite things. Let's see where this is going.
Yeah. Rich?
Well, for those of you unaware of the process, which I assume is many of you, I have a go-in blind policy with any film I haven't seen for this podcast. So, unlike Aaron, I came in with little to no knowledge of the production elements, except that Paul Williams is in this, at which point, hearing his name, I said, sold.
Yeah, and before I leave you with this, I'm going to tease out some excitement from everyone watching and my co-host by saying this film's legacy is shocking. The amount of people who are fans of it and its impact on popular culture is very, like, it's a very obscure little bit, but the certain people it inspired and who are fans of it will definitely actually probably surprise you. And that's what I'm going to leave you with before we decide to split away here. And we are going to cut away, watch the film, and then what will be a couple hours for us will only be an instance for you. But when we are back, we will be discussing everyone's thoughts on Phantom of the Paradise. Alright, cool. We're back. So... on reviewing, I believe that was still a fantastic movie, still a blast, very fun, tragic film, if that can be believed. It's got a breakneck pace, but I love it. What do you guys think?
I do not see myself having any complaints about this movie at all. Phantom of the Paradise is honestly perfect. I mean, one could say the style might not be for them, but that's a shallow criticism considering how much it succeeds. But before I elaborate, Aaron?
I actually really like this movie. As I said before I saw it, I've only seen clips and, like, little bits of it and reviews and that kind of thing. But I had fun with it. It's what, as Dalton said, it's fun tragedy, which is kind of a weird way to describe a movie.
Yeah.
But it has fun scenes. It has its sad scenes, but it's really entertaining, and I enjoyed the music. It's Paul Williams because come on.
Yeah.
But besides that, one thing that we were mentioning when we were watching is that some people may not be a fan of, like, certain little bits of the editing.
Yeah.
does get a little cartoony.
A little cartoony.
But I feel it fits the style.
But it fits the style, yeah.
Also, it's an adaptation of a theater or opera classic. There was there was no subdued way of handling this.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a subdued version of a modernized Phantom of the Opera, you're watching the wrong thing.
You're watching the wrong movie.
Yeah. This movie expertly combines together elements of Phantom of the Opera, Dorian Gray, and Faust in just beautiful ways. And the idea of casting an actor primarily known for theater, William Finley, as the Phantom, paid off because the guy just oozes just like
he sells it.
Energy. Like, you feel so bad for the character of William Leach for everything he goes through. Winslow Leach, because everything he goes through, you've got. It makes the stuff that Eric, the Phantom, went through look like nothing in comparison.
Yeah. And as someone who has read different adaptations and was obsessed with Phantom in like the 7th and 8th grade, when you look at Phantom of the Opera and Phantom of the Paradise, Winslow goes through a lot more than Eric did. And for those of you unaware, Eric is the actual name of the Phantom of the Opera. His name is Eric with a K.
I mean, that original book is weird, man.
Yeah.
I mean, no adaptations had, like, the rat catcher.
A lot of the source materials go into weird places, though.
Oh, yeah. Like, there's an entire irrelevant interlude in, like, Frankenstein, which is just like, wow, we're hiking the mountains. It sure is nice out here. We're going to spend an entire chapter telling you just how pretty the Alps are.
It's also, like, the beginning of Dracula, too.
Yeah, that's true.
It's Bram Stoker just talking about the scenery, and then I remember,
being like, have you guys ever been to the Romanian countryside? Striking.
Yeah, and talking about the people there.
Yeah.
And I remember,
there's even a bit about a dish that he just writes out the entire recipe for a Romanian dish. Oh, now we apparently need to have a podcast where we riff on classic literature because we're not already going to have enough people mad at us for some takes we have on this.
Yeah, anyway, back to the movie.
Oh, God, yes. Such a good thing. Going back to the style, this editing is so good. It works so well for the movie.
The transitions.
And that was helped by Paul Hirsch editing it. And for you editing geeks out there, yes, that is the same Paul Hirsch from the original Star Wars trilogy editing the movie. And you can tell at certain points, I'm like, this editing is so familiar. And I'm like, Paul Hirsch.
Yeah.
Wait, some of those wipes are
very Star Wars.
Smooth.
Very Star Wars.
And something that I have a feeling that I'm going to be bringing up a lot. I have a feeling I'm going to be the lighting guy because, once again, the lighting in this,
God. Yeah.
And the
everything.
Staging is so good. There's a moment where you see one of the auditions come up and Paul Williams is sitting up in the balcony and you don't see him even with light on his face until it zooms in.
Yeah.
Like he's like covered in shadows.
And also, another thing that you see, 2 or 3 times in the movie is the split screen.
Yeah. That split screen's so well done in this.
It is really well done.
Yeah, that's a hit or miss technique, but this is definitely a hit.
The film is like, I've seen a lot of movies that are edited in a very like weird kind of choppy way where it really does not work. That sequel they did to the Wall Street movie.
Oh, Money Never Sleeps.
Money Never Sleeps. Such bad editing, but this is the polar opposite of that. It's a very stylistic, in-your-face sort of editing, and the movie has a breakneck speed, but it works. And it helps that there is a couple slow moments that kind of like put it in pause for a sec to let you have perspective on stuff. And holy shit, I could just go on about this movie, like, to be honest.
Don't worry, we're helping you out.
But I promised them and the audience the big treat, which was this film's cultural impact. And I'm gonna blow Richie away right now. So, when this movie came out, it started to tour a few cult circuits. It didn't really do well, but it did release overseas. Two teenagers happened to see this movie together and became lifelong friends afterwards. Do you know who those teenagers were?
No, this is all the film stories, and this is the one that eludes me. All the trivia I have. Come on.
Let's hear
it.
They were two French teenagers who went on to become pretty big in the music industry.
Oh, no
Yes.
way!
Guy Manuel de Holman Cristo and Thomas Bangalter
Daft Punk.
of Daft Punk.
Also, I'm gonna have to really bend over backwards for my editing job.
Don't worry. I mean, so yeah, if it wasn't for Phantom of the Paradise, we would not have Daft Punk.
Yeah.
And in fact, are you familiar with their film Electroma?
Yes.
The outfit for Electroma comes from the Phantom.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
There's literally nothing about this movie that is bad.
And lesser note, I would say, is it was also one of the favorite it's also one of the favorite movies of acclaimed author Bret Easton Ellis of American Psycho. Yeah, one of his favorite.
I can see it.
Yeah, it's one of his favorite movies.
It has this sort of grim sense of humor that you could see in Ellis's
writings.
writings.
Yeah. When, in fact, when William Finley died, he put a thing on his Twitter that was like, "Rest in peace, William Leach," otherwise known as,
For those of you
Winslow.
who have,
You keep saying William, it's Winslow.
Yeah.
for those of you who have only seen movie American Psycho, and if you want to read the book, pleasant dreams. Anyway.
Yeah, I've heard the book's pretty different, but yeah, no, this is one of those films where it does the very clever technique of, I'm going to take little bits of this, little bits of that, little bits of that, sprinkle them in together, make a nice little stew out of it, but it actually works.
It mixes in well.
Oh, God. I was surprised how... First time I saw this, I was surprised I was able to mix all these elements together, and I cannot give enough credit to Paul Williams for selling this film, too, because between his acting as Swan, where he's just such a slime ball, and just the music in this movie, he's able to nail so many styles. He nails that 50s doo-wop style, very well.
Soft rock.
Surf rock, Beach Boys kind of stuff.
Leans more into power pop by the end of it,
Yeah.
where he takes a sort of...
Does the glam rock kind of stuff, very similar to, the 70s rock bands, very Alice Cooper, very Kiss, which... Talk about having your finger on the pulse. This movie came out in 1974 and Kiss debuted in 1973.
And that was something I brought up in the middle of that scene where the Kiss XPs come in.
The Undeads, yeah. Great band name. Great band name.
Yeah.
I turned to Dalton and I'm looking at that scene and I'm like, how is a movie this much a product of its time? And also kind of ahead of its time.
Oh, yeah. The editing, the style, the cinematography, everything of it is very cutting edge for the time. It feels very Italian at moments, too. It reminded me, a lot of the editing reminded me a lot of...
And the lighting.
Yeah, and the lighting. It reminded me a lot of, Dario Argento's stuff in a good way.
Especially Suspiria.
Yeah, which...
Speaking of
coincidence...
Suspiria...
Jessica Harper's in this, who of course starred in Suspiria.
She did a great job too.
Oh yeah, she was great as Phoenix. Tragic figure.
Mm-hmm.
And can we talk about how she has a character death and is basically reborn?
Mm-hmm.
And in a way that isn't totally ham-fisted.
No. It's not in your face and.
Mm-hmm.
Jeez, Finley kills it in this movie. You feel so bad for him. He sells the nebbish nerd songwriter who is a genius but would never make it conventionally in the industry. A very Elton John kind of figure almost,
Yeah.
And then he gets put in the costume and you ask yourself, this is the same guy? This is just... he is running an acting triathlon here.
your hardcore theater nerds will tell you that's no surprise. Finley's been in a lot of great productions and stuff like back in the day. So,
admittedly, I'm a little less well versed in theater than I am with film.
Yeah, and of course he's been in some other great movies. He was in Simon, Silent Rage, Sisters, The Wedding Party, a good amount of movies. But yeah, he was really well known for his stage work and just great dude.
A lesser movie would have this sort of performance, and that performance would be called hammy. This is just emotion injected into reality. And it's beautiful. It says something, too, that he's able to credibly sell this underneath the
facial
costume.
Obscuring mask, you know?
Yeah.
And the makeup, too. Because, like, he does still very much
those
look
metallic teeth are so creepy. I love it.
Yeah.
He looks like a supervillain. He looks like the type of person who you think wouldn't be easy to take.
Wouldn't look out of place on an episode of like Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark?
You wouldn't be able to take him seriously in a lesser movie, but this,
Yeah.
all the pieces were in place, and it's beautiful.
I love that vocal synthesizer effect they use on him too.
Can we talk about the cinematography? Because that was just genius in this movie.
Oh, yes.
So good. I feel really bad that the cinematographer never became more famous, which, according to my notes here that I'm looking at, was Larry Piser. Now, Larry Piser was never really well known, which shocked me. He's done a couple things people might be familiar with, some movies that were kind of, like, popular somewhat in the day, but nothing that's, like, really stood the test of time like Phantom of the Paradise has. Probably what most of you would know him for is he actually did the cinematography for the music video for the Springsteen song Dancing in the Dark.
Whoa. But how is he not bigger?
I don't know. I don't know how he wasn't bigger. He died about 12 years ago, rest in peace, but a great... Finley died, I think, Finley died a few years ago as well. But talk about a movie that was ahead of its time, because not only was this movie a box office bust, just complete failure, but critics hated this movie. They despised it. Like, only a few like magazines reviewed it like favorably at the time. Most of the people who saw it just like trashed it, and I think it's kind of because it was ahead of its time. It feels very like late 70s, very 80s in moments. It definitely feels like it's got like the pacing and sort of the style of like almost a music video.
Yeah.
But that works. But that works.
In its favor.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me how ahead of its time was, because a lot of the cinematography wouldn't be out of place in a Sam Raimi movie. I wouldn't be surprised if he saw this, because when...
Those tracking dolly shots that they use.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. From the Phantom's point of view, when it cuts to him before he puts the mask on and he was walking through the hall, I'm like, Sam Raimi would be proud.
Or the scenes where the Phantom's like running down a hallway and they have the camera guy just like following him, running.
Shaking a bit.
Yeah, it feels very Evil Dead.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You wouldn't think that would work in a more dramatic sort of story, but it does.
Yeah, and this movie's always meant to be a bit camping on the nose anyway.
So it works to its
Yeah.
benefit.
Yeah.
And there's also the scene that Richie mentioned about the scene where Paul Williams' character is in the bathtub, and there's the mirror there.
Yeah.
And he's on both sides in the mirror. And I know it's a camera trick. It's very difficult to do from what I've heard. I've never tried it myself.
When it's from the back, though, I'm
but
pretty sure
it's easier because they can use a body double.
I'm pretty sure that was a
It's
body
so
double.
hard.
Because that guy looked a lot more toned than Paul Williams
Because
you have to use a body double, and then you have to make sure that the camera
doesn't reflect
or
and
anything
body
like
double's
that.
face, and you can't see the camera.
And it's a multi-phase process, because you gotta have faith in, one, the cinematographers to be able to properly compose the shot.
And they didn't have computers.
And
they didn't have like computers to work with that.
That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, you gotta have faith in those body doubles, because they need control.
Yeah.
That is deceptively hard.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and also, since this was made in the 70s, there are the effects are practical effects.
Everything's practical.
Everything's practical effects. And there's a scene in the beginning where, kind of the beginning, where the car gets blown up on stage.
Yeah.
And I remember we were watching that, and I just said, that's a practical effect, this is the 70s. Because there's no way back then you could use a computer to make an explosion, because that wasn't possible.
And there's just, like, between the montage shots and everything, just... And Paul Williams just sells so many styles in this movie. Like, he knew what was big in the 70s, and it reflects in the music. And some of the music was ahead of its time. Like, the stuff the Undeads play feels very, like, what would be popular, like, only a couple of years later, because just a year later, Alice Cooper made his debut.
Yeah.
And Kiss blew up in the following years. It kind of almost predicted some of the late 70s music trends.
I feel like this movie was ahead of its time.
Absolutely.
It's going to be a slogan for a killer score.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This film, I would say, reflects that more than any other film we've probably screened. With, like, Wet Hot American Summer trailing closely behind.
Yeah, but that was more of a ahead of its time in the comedy sense.
Yeah.
But you can see the fingerprints of this sort of movie on all sorts of huge hits in the 80s. From, once again, Evil Dead to some of the big rock opera musicals.
And Dalton was saying that reminds him of, like, Repo, which came out in the 2000s.
And some of the editing and cinematography even reminds me of, like, the movies of like, John Hughes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, the editing techniques, like, some of the editing in this film feels like something you'd see in, like, Ferris Bueller almost.
And just like Ferris Bueller in that, I feel like this and other movies from that era are one of the few movies I think know how to use quick cuts.
Oh, yeah.
Because you look at modern action movies that make things incomprehensible with all the cuts. But here, it's used to build tension. It's there to show you the atmosphere from every angle. Like, later in the movie, when there's assassination being prevented, all these cuts happening between characters' faces and the hallway. It's not...
And the sniper and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's not there... It's not paced that way because the filmmakers were incompetent. It's there because time is of the essence and the cinematography wants you to feel that.
Yeah. So, out of curiosity, you guys got a favorite song from the movie? I know it's a bit hard to pick because they're all kind of bangers, but...
That's like picking a favorite kid. Why would you do
that? Yeah, it's a bit hard for me too. It's kind of a toss up between the song Faust, because like it's sort of the central piece of the movie, and the Phantom's theme for when he's actually composing his cantata. I love that scene in that song. It's very stylistic, but it works perfectly well. Great montage sequence. Absolutely. I cannot believe how this movie is just so impactful, so relevant. It's just a fun movie too. If you are ever looking for a movie that is just fun, breakneck, and a bit absurd, you have found the right movie.
Oh yeah. Doesn't even matter if it's Halloween either, because there's a little bit of everything past the basic premise lifted from a horror novel. You've got musical numbers, comedy, well, dark comedy, very acerbic comedy.
This will be kicking off our. This is actually also the kicking off point for our Halloween three-parter, where we'll be looking at movies with a more macabre bent to them and a bit more darkness in them. We're going to be going sort of a sliding scale. We had like a medium level of darkness with you today with Phantom of the Paradise. There's some more tragic elements, but once again, we're going to be putting our dear buddy Richie through a ringer next week through a fun ringer, but a baffling one at that. Dear Miss Erin Murray has picked a film that I am a huge fan of that she is also big on.
Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yes.
It's one of my favorite movies, and it's definitely a ride.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just shocked I haven't seen it yet.
That is bewildering to me when it comes to you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Considering my taste.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of
Yeah.
which, favorite
Meatloaf's in the movie.
Yeah. Man, let me just preemptively punish myself. Ow. There.
That was
Now-
him doing that. Don't worry, I didn't.
No, that was me. Now, favorite musical numbers. I think the hell of it, honestly, just because it ends on such a...
It's a great closer.
Like a stilted piano.
simultaneous...
Stilted piano.
Yeah, the
The
piano...
jaunty piano. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
the piano is composed in such a way like the Phantom's laughing,
Mhm.
reveling in his simultaneous defeat and victory.
Yeah,
With
yeah.
a wicked gleam in his eyes. And I'm gonna say it, this is probably one of my favorite credit roles ever.
Oh, yeah.
With him
Very
just
creative
in the
credit.
room.
Once
He's
again,
in the room playing on the
super
keyboard.
ahead of its time. Like that those are the kind of credit scenes you would see in like an 80s movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like didn't the Goonies have a similar credit sequence?
Actually, yeah.
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 What towards the end, it cuts to a bunch of scenes.
Yeah. I would say...
I mean, I think that's a candidate. Have you seen the Goonies?
Yeah, I've seen the Goonies.
Oh, okay. We've
Darn
all seen
it.
the Goonies.
No,
then.
we've
No,
all
no
seen-
Goonies then. No Goonies.
No.
then.
No
Oh,
Goonies, no Goonies.
oh well. Oh well.
Oh well. I still think my favorite is the first song that Winslow's playing. Is that Faust? Yeah, Faust.
Faust is great.
Yeah,
Oh.
I like the way that he just emotes when he's
Mhm.
playing that, like, just by himself in like the venue while they're changing sets and that kind of thing for the next band.
It's a captivating sequence too,
So
due to the fact
atmospheric.
that it not only foreshadows the events of the film perfectly, but it just puts you right in the mindset of William Leach. You know, the struggling musician who's just like a scrappy, guy with a bunch of ingenuity who just wants to make it and would do anything to have his music be heard and played.
Yeah, and I remember during that scene you see Paul Williams, like, henchman kind of guy, I guess.
Mhm.
Like, just talking, you see Winslow playing piano in the background, and I was just watching the piano instead of, like, what was in the foreground, because I was expecting something to happen.
Yeah. And when they transition over to him actually playing, and you can just see the way he's emoting and getting into the music, so much of this performance is great because Finlay has great body language, and to play the character of Winslow Leach, you need good body language.
Oh, yeah.
It's so much based off emotive, movement and expression because...
You know what it reminds me of, and it's gonna sound weird at first
Mm.
because it's such a different person in terms of musical style. The way he played kind of reminded me of Ray Charles.
Yeah,
How he got into it and
throwing himself around,
throwing himself to the rhythm of the
Mhm.
music.
Yeah.
Doesn't hurt that Ray Charles was probably one of the best living, breathing piano players ever.
And the fact that they were able to, in the Beach Bum song later on in the movie, sync up the ticking of a bomb to the music
Yeah.
is really great.
Oh, that's so good.
Mm-hmm.
There's a kind of auditory Kuleshov effect
Mhm.
moment going on, aided, by the way,
Because, like, the
By
taking
the
of it...
split-screen effect,
yeah, the
yeah.
split screen, and also the taking of it is, like, it's similar to, like, a metronome.
Yeah,
oh,
it does sound like a
I
metronome.
should have observed that before. That's
So
exactly
good,
what it is.
So good.
Yeah.
That is just
I mean,
film composition heaven there.
Mm-hmm.
obviously, I think the reason we've spent less time talking about the composers in this is because it's freaking Paul Williams. What else do you want me to say? The
Yeah.
Rainbow Connection.
Which-
that
And he
alone.
also wrote a bunch of songs for other musicians back in the 70s and the 80s.
Oh, wow. I actually was on...
My phone is turned off, so I can't look it up. But there's some songs that he wrote that I can't think of right
I
now.
will have to check that
Yeah,
out
just go
then
to Paul
because
Williams.
I mean this like Paul Williams was an absolute just genius. He still is. He's still alive. So, I mean, yeah, he's written stuff for for Dave. Oh yeah, he wrote for David Bowie, The Carpenters,
Three Dog Night.
Yeah. Oh wow, We've Only Just Begun, which by the way is a haunting song, especially when used in horror stuff. Oh, and he wrote the opening theme for The Love Boat.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also that song that we couldn't think of the name of earlier from A Star Is Born.
Evergreen.
Evergreen.
Yeah.
That's the name we couldn't think of.
Given all this, I really do want to talk about his acting too.
Oh,
It
yeah.
amazes me. Well, two things amaze me about this. The first is that he was able to transition from relatively radio-friendly stuff to being the worst kind of scumbag in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
He oozes faux friendliness
Yeah.
while simultaneously setting people up for death and servitude.
Yeah.
Like, if this movie is going with a fairly explicit devil parallel, which, yeah, it is, this might honestly be one of my favorite movie devils, right up with Max von Sydow as the devil from Needful Things.
He's meant to be a bit more of Dorian Gray, but yeah, there definitely is some devil elements in there.
Well, a mix.
Yeah, a bit of a mix.
Yeah. His acting was phenomenal. I thought his voice acting for the Penguin in the Batman animated series was good. I thought that was the best thing he would surprise me with as an actor, but this.
I mean, he always kind of kills it whenever he's acting. Like, underrated actor. He was also in Smokey and the Bandit.
Yeah.
And he cameos in the Muppet movie as the piano player at El Sleazo.
Yeah, El Sleazo.
And he's just great. Oh, showtime.
I don't think I have a single bad thing to say about this movie.
Yeah.
The only bad thing I can say is there's like an extra in one scene she's really, really bad in this.
Yeah,
Sounds like
not great.
Sounds like a female Barney Fife.
Yeah, and just she like, wow, he hasn't aged today, and it's like, oh,
that delivery.
We couldn't get another take. Like, was there no option for another take there?
To be fair, the production issues and the fact that the movie turned out the way it did make it astonishing.
Oh, yeah.
All the stuff that was stacked against this movie, and it turned out this good. We're lucky that was the worst thing about
William Finley could have gone much the way of Winslow Leach, because they did use an actual like record press for that scene, and they had taken precautions to make it more protective, but something went wrong with the machinery as they were filming that scene, and they had to like pull them out. Man almost got basically murdered by a record press.
Oh my god.
I'm considering coming up with my own scale that I'm not sure anyone has made up, called the Practicality Danger Scale of effects.
Yeah.
Which, it's my unspoken theory that the better a practical effect is, the more life-threateningly dangerous it is.
Yeah,
but this reminds me so much.
It goes from like a one being like a Michael Bay where everything's done with a computer to like a 10 where you're like in a Jackie Chan movie.
Or an 8 where you're like Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future 3. Fun fact, he almost got hung.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
The noose slipped around his neck, and had it not been for a stagehand who noticed that he wasn't breathing, that would have been the end of Michael J. Fox.
And also the many problems they had when they were filming The Exorcist.
Yeah.
We would need an entire separate episode for that one.
I mean, it doesn't help that the director was kind of a dick in that. Pull
Kinda.
harder.
Kind of.
Kind of.
Very much so.
He made Stanley Kubrick look like Nanny by comparison.
You know, we could probably do an episode on Exorcist 3, because talk about an underrated movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
It's not perfect, but it honestly is better than the first in a couple of ways in certain moments.
I mean, the climax was kind of tacked on, because literally studio executives forced the climax in that movie because they were like, it's supposed, but it's called The Exorcist. You gotta have an exorcism in it.
Despite the fact that 2 went in a completely different direction.
Oh,
And
let's not discuss Exorcist 2.
yeah, we're rambling.
And
Back to
also,
this movie.
but yeah, point is, before back to the movie, the whole reason I think I want to do Exorcist 3 is just to rant and rave about how good Brad Dourif is in The Exorcist 3.
I will gladly join you in that, my brother.
Just steals the movie.
Oh,
I mean, but then again, you had a whole good game. George C. Scott.
yes.
Love George C. Scott.
Man, that'll be a fun.
Yeah.
I wish that were a Halloween episode, but we have other plans.
We've
for
got
that.
obligations and we don't have time to fit it into the schedule. Perhaps next year.
Perhaps next year's Halloween.
Perhaps. We'll see. We've got a lot of great films we can cover.
But getting back to Phantom of the Paradise, I wouldn't be surprised if this were a inspiration on multiple levels.
Mm-hmm.
Because some of the cinematography really reminded me of a good Michael Mann movie. Like, you ever see Manhunter?
It does. It is similar to some of Michael Mann stuff.
I'm not sure if I like that movie better than Red Dragon. It's kind of neck and neck, but the cinematography in that, I wouldn't be surprised if that were inspired by Phantom of the Paradise, because it does have a sort of noirish quality to a neo-noirish quality that really drips and adds on layers to already atmospheric scenes, like the hallways, like when the Phantom's first putting his get-up together and it goes through that POV shot.
And you can just hear him breathing.
All the red lighting.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like art in motion.
That whole sequence is so giallo. Like you wonder if Brian De Palma had been like binging some like giallo films before he watched this, because some stuff in this feels very much like a giallo movie.
You can see some of that in other movies he's done later in his career, like even Scarface had that kind of lighting trick here and there.
I know this will get me probably killed by a few people, but I'm gonna just say this is probably my favorite Brian De Palma movie. It's just so stylistic and just engrossing.
I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up climbing up the list for me. And that's saying something, because Brian De Palma doesn't really have a lot of bad movies that I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a prolific career. Man has directed a lot of movies, but he really sold it. His writing for this film was great too, because he wrote the script, and great script.
Oh yeah.
And other fun note on the cultural impact of this movie: it is indirectly responsible for Carrie. As I've discussed with my co-host, Sissy Spacek did the set dressing on this movie, and that's how she met Brian De Palma. And of course, De Palma later directed the adaptation of Stephen King's Carrie. So yeah,
which amazes me, because Spacek was still young at the time of this movie's release. So you gotta wonder just where she got all that talent for
set design.
Set design.
Yeah. The set is so great in this movie. Mm-hmm. There's so much comical stuff, but also great stuff. The fact that the undeads, their stage looks like it came out of the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and it looks very early German expressionist. Brilliant stuff right there.
Hats off to her.
Oh,
seriously.
The fact that Swan's desk is a giant record.
Yeah.
Oh. That's my favorite shot in the whole movie.
Yeah.
That panning overhead shot of him in the center of that gold record table with all the acts around him.
And the way it spins around to show the different acts. Yeah.
Just perfection.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't think we could say much more on this movie, because we've been gushing and gushing on it, but the cinematic parallels, the excellent parallels to literature.
I will say this. There were elements of this in our previous subject, rock and roll, that I've praised it for, but I feel like this is the sort of movie that rock and roll could have been had less elements have been against it.
It's ahead of its time. If you love campy horror comedies or musicals
Rock
in general.
operas.
Rock operas.
operas.
If you dig stuff like, if you're a huge mark for like our next week's subject, Rocky Horror, I feel like this would make a great double feature with like Rocky Horror.
Oh,
Dead Paradise. Oh,
I
yeah.
have a feeling it would be.
It works well if you're a fan of like Repo the Genetic Opera or just anything that's kind of melodramatic, a bit over the top of the like
Macabre.
I was gonna say the guy who did I can't remember his name right now. Oh, Terrence Zdunich, I think his name is, who did Repo. He also went on to do The Devil's Carnival, which is something that you guys need to watch because I love that movie.
Oh, there's another
it's hard
episode.
to find.
Well, there's another episode we have.
See, that's the beauty of this. We're gonna be bouncing
ideas
stuff
off of each other while recording
all the time.
So my final take, because I honestly this is gonna be a little shorter just because I don't have much more to say aside from gushing on this, and I don't want to give too much away because I really want people to see this one.
Agreed.
You owe it to yourself to get a copy. You can find this pretty cheap online. I don't believe it's available for streaming anywhere, but Shout Factory has released it for very reasonable prices. I got a copy offline for like $20. You can find it pretty cheap.
Because Shout Factory is frankly the unsung hero of
district film
home video distribution.
Absolutely. There's so much stuff we would not have in our hands if not for Shout Factory. They're right up there with like people like Sentai Filmworks and G-Kids when it comes to getting us more obscure stuff, and Arrow Video.
Both of which I think will definitely have films that we will cover on this podcast.
So, my final conclusion, loved it when I first saw it back when I was a teenager. Love it now, seeing it again in my 20s. Held up even better for me now. I appreciate it even more now, I think, especially after having viewed it with uninitiated people.
Where's this movie been all my life?
Yeah.
I highly, highly recommend this. So that's me signing out. Before I pass off the other closing parts to my co-hosts, I am, of course, Dalton Morrison. You can find me on Twitter at SickJacketMan, YouTube by the same name. I've done stuff with Mr. Rogue's channel, as I said before, and I've done stuff with the first 177, another YouTube channel. Catch me on there if you want. My YouTube channel will be having some videos soon. I think my first thing I'll probably be releasing is covering the fantastic Japanese novel No Longer Human, which I want to talk about and then compare it to the manga adaptation, which I feel sucks, to be frank, but I'll get into that in my own video. Thoughts from you, Aaron?
I like this movie more than I thought I would, to be honest. Like, I went in a little bit blind. I was like, I've heard it's campy. But I like camp in certain scenarios. I mean, you just look at Rocky Horror Picture Show. But I love this movie now. I've seen it, this is my first time watching, obviously. But yeah, if you can find either, like a download of it or a physical copy, we got a Blu-ray of it online. If you can find it, give it a watch. But as for me, I'm Aaron Murray. I'm from witchandcrafts.com. We have put out our fall collection. Give that a look. And for me, that is signing off. But how about you, Richie?
It is always a pleasure when you go in blind, expecting something entertaining and then getting a veritable masterpiece, and this is definitely one of those scenarios. I said this in the middle of watching it to Dalton and Aaron. I could not find a single thing meaningfully to criticize about this film.
Just minor little nitpicks here and there, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But those are meaningless.
Absolutely.
Especially when you take into account the compositions, the acting, the veritable gallery of art that is the cinematography, and
set design.
Just the sheer unadulterated style.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It oozes it.
That said, that has been Richie Eckert here from Rich Reviews. Perhaps more reviews will come out on that site eventually, but the blog's been on hiatus for the sake of this and my voice acting projects. some of which you can find on Mr. Rogues' Arkham Patient Sessions series, and more projects including fan dubs and demos and collaborations with other VAs are coming soon on my YouTube channel under Richard Eckert.
Alright, so signing off for the 3rd episode of Killer Score. Catch us for the 4th episode of Rocky Horror.